What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Perspectives Podcast. This is Chase here, and we got an awesome guest on the podcast today. We got one of my dear friends here. Would you want to introduce yourself, man?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chase. My name is Rowland Pettit. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, dude. And tell them a little bit just about who you are, where you're from, and anything you think people would need to know about you, man.
All right, as introduction?
Sure. Yeah, man.
So, my name is Rowland. That's actually Australian. My grandfather came over from Adelaide as a scientist sometime, I think in the 50s or 60s.
Really? Dude, I didn't even know that, dude.
Yep, I know.
That's
pretty cool.
Freaking legit.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty proud of him and my grandma. They both were scientists, PhD scientists, did research at the University of Texas, Austin.
Dang, man.
So that's how they came to America. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where I got my name from. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, but spent many years in Orlando, Florida.
Yep.
So I've kind of got split ties there in terms of where I'm from.
Yeah. Then your family decided to come over to the great
state. Yeah, I've been naturalized. I think I wear the boots, no hat yet, but got a couple pairs of boots.
Yeah, man. You repping Texas well, man.
I'm trying.
Yeah, dude. But really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah,
I'm really excited just to see, just to hear a little bit about your story and everything like that. But yeah, man, I think something that'd be cool to just kind of talk about is, after kind of growing up in Florida for a few years and dabbling around with some lacrosse out there, which we'll talk about in a minute. Mm-hmm. What was talk about a little bit like what that transition was like from Florida to Texas at a relatively young age, and just kind of some of the positives, some of the things you struggled with, things like that.
Sure. So I think that's exactly right. I was relatively young when I moved from Orlando to Fort Worth. It was my dad's job as a scientist. He moved to stay with his company in Alcon. It honestly wasn't terrible. I was moving before my freshman year of high school, which is kind of a natural transition point anyways. So the school I was joining, there were some other people joining as well. So kind of just rolled with the flow there. I think it was a little harder on my sister, actually. She was a junior in high school at the time. She did very well with it and made a lot of long-lasting friends from it. But I think moving as a junior is always hard, leaving an established friend group.
Exactly. Yeah, and then, I don't know, because I feel like a lot of, at least reflecting on, like, my high school experience, like, a lot of those, like, really memorable times are during, like, junior, senior year.
Right, yep.
Like, junior or senior prom, homecoming,
exactly.
Like, graduation.
Sports. Yeah, so, I mean, I had a pretty normal arc there. I mean, I got all 4 years. There was definitely a transition period, which was kind of hard, kind of redefining a little bit, trying to leave the kind of established norms of where you grew up, where there's like expectations of you, where you kind of have your personality set to a new environment where you kind of have to, basically tell people who you are every day. I mean, that's pretty much the same transition you experienced, going to college or medical school now. Like it's all similar, but that was definitely hard as an early age.
Yeah, man. And so, what do you think some of the things are that God perhaps like provided during that transition that helped with that, like whether it be church, whether it be activities, friends, experiences, different things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think it's good to go there right off the bat. So I am a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home.
Yep.
Specifically, kind of that community that I was referring to, I had a great church back home that I actually still do service trips with every once in a while. It's called First United Methodist Church, Winter Park. They got me going at an early age with youth group. I even did like choir tour and stuff like that.
You were in the choir?
I wasn't the best singer, but I did choir tour, yeah.
You want to belt out a couple notes?
No, I can't.
All good, man.
Anyways, so yeah, kind of had my faith on autopilot a little bit moving into Texas. I had really good sources of community, a really church I felt comfortable with, knew a lot of people in. It was just easy to go every week.
Yeah.
Moving to Texas, obviously that's a totally new transition period. I maintained my faith, but it was definitely, hard. It's not like, given to you in terms of you go to church, you see people all the time that well and just feel welcomed.
Yeah.
The church was very welcoming. It just those things take time.
Yeah.
So that was hard. I think, it was definitely isolating at times as well. But you mentioned the way God provided. I think there's a lot of cool things that God has done in my life through situations like this. Probably the first was that He gave me an opportunity to keep playing the sport I loved at that stage in life. I was pretty focused on lacrosse, and moving from Orlando, which at the time wasn't necessarily a hotbed, of lacrosse, but had a pretty good program and high school programs I was looking forward to participating in at Winter Park, to Texas, where in Fort Worth
basically nothing.
There was not a lot. Yeah. It's grown a lot since then, and I'm happy about that. So that's what actually led me to become friends with you. Yeah. I got to play for the closest team to my geographical location, and that was Colleyville Heritage. And so I became a Panther for one season of the year. Which was cool, and that was difficult, but my parents were great, drove me out there like 45 minutes to go play. And that was the first kind of step where I felt like, God did help me in that transition. He gave me this opportunity that then led to pretty cool things. But at the time, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't know the full picture and everything.
Right, exactly.
And like I could only just imagine, because I've grown up in the same area my whole life. Mm-hmm. In the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I still live there. Mm-hmm. And so I could only imagine like what it would be like trying to move, especially at a young age, whenever we're very impressionable, to a completely new area, and just trying to be accepted. Trying to create new friendships.
Right.
And sometimes meeting, people who are absolutely awesome, who are able to encourage you in your faith. But at the same time, like as you're meeting new people, you don't really know the character of who you're meeting. And so then sometimes you can meet some I'll just say like not faithful people, or not life-giving people who make you do things that might not be the best,
right,
or whatever. And so, man, like it's amazing that, and a testimony that, like, even like just what God did throughout like that time period, being able to cover you from a lot of different things that could have happened.
Right.
And obviously, we all made our mistakes. We all did silly things back in high school. But no, being able to like really cover you from like a lot of the really traumatic things is really good.
Yeah, I agree. I was thankful after the move of getting to plug in some good community. High school has its arc, and it's, kind of typical pitfalls, and, definitely fell into a few of those. But, I do think God was good and had a plan for me and all that. Fell into several of those. I'm not trying to belittle any of that, but I think it's important to focus on the way that God has worked, and He has done some cool things. So
yeah, man.
Kind of jump into the end of high school there. Yeah. Probably senior year. Was at another crossroads looking down college. At that point, I knew I had the opportunity to have a spot on the Duke lacrosse team, which was awesome.
So where again?
Yeah, Duke. So that was pretty cool.
For those of y'all who don't know, Duke is one of the best programs in the nation. And how many national championships did you win?
We're jumping ahead. I was really, really fortunate to be a part of 2 national championship teams.
Crazy, man.
All 4 times we did go to the playoffs. It was a great experience.
Yeah. So even though he's saying that was just a little experience, it was something pretty neat.
Yeah, it was awesome.
But yeah, man. So going through senior year of high school.
Right. So going back to high school, so I'm trying to think through exactly what all was going on. I think probably the best way to put it, going through senior year of high school, was really a time where it was more up to me to really own my faith.
Yeah.
I definitely had all the, temptations of wanting to run with the cool crowd, and knew that was going to be, was realizing that was hard to do.
Yeah.
And so senior year, we actually went on a really cool mission trip with my parents to Belize.
Yeah.
And we got to just have some great experiences. And that kind of led me to just really open up to my parents in a lot of different ways that I hadn't, before, and just, express to them things that, I wanted to talk through with them. And that was pretty powerful. And it was also, I kind of view that as it wasn't like an origin point. Like, I do believe I was, I do believe I saved, if you will, all throughout. Then, all throughout kind of my younger years. But that was a point where I was like, you know what, I really want to
recommit,
do this right, own my faith, seek it out myself, not necessarily just accept ways it's given to me.
Yep.
And so that was pretty cool. That led to a hard first fall of college, because summer before college you recommit to something. Then obviously college has pressures in lots of different ways.
Yep.
But that ended up still being good.
And it's cool because it was around that same time of my life that kind of I went through a phase of needing to start to adventure on my own, start to make sure what I believed really was what I believed, and to figure out why. And so me throughout my senior year, I don't know if you remember, I did an internship under my pastor at my church my senior year, and
you were the only reason why I was able to head out that one night after graduation. We hung out. We probably shouldn't bring that up on the deal, but
we won't talk about handball. that was a silly night.
Yeah. For the listeners, I was able to use Chase as my excuse to get to hang out after graduation by quoting that he wanted to be a pastor. So that got me in the door to be able to spend the late night hours, and we didn't do anything too crazy, but I ended up cutting my leg open pretty bad and had to
go to the
call
hospital.
my parents at 3 a.m. to come fix my leg.
Yeah.
But it was all stupid stuff, nothing bad.
Yeah, just typical high school silliness.
It was good. It's a good time.
Goodness, dude. And yeah, pretty much from what I've seen over the last few months, anyone who's known Rowland over the last few years has heard that story.
I love telling that one. I got this sweet scar on my leg that I like showing off.
It's insane, dude. But yeah, man. And so around that time, I had to go through my own adventure. And I, after my internship was done at the church, I felt God telling me, hey, it's time for you to start your own adventure. You need to go off to another church. You've been in the same church for all 18 years of your life up to that point, and so you need to start something new. And that's when I started going to Gateway on my own. And it was definitely tough because for me, at first, I didn't really have that abundant source of fellowship at Gateway. I had my buddy Joel, which I forgot Joel was there at the hospital. He
was. I think I met him.
He was. We were joking with him because we were like, "Hey, Rowland needs a skin graft."
Oh right, yeah, that would have been funny. That would have been
joking with Joel that we needed his skin. For those of y'all who don't know, Joel is a great buddy of ours who moved over from Uganda about a year before that, start of our senior year. So that was great. But yeah, Joel was there during that start of me going to Gateway. But outside of that, there wasn't really a whole bunch of fellowship, and so there was a difficulty because and I'm sure you can attest to it, kind of going up to Duke and not really knowing a lot of people. But whenever you have to either start an adventure or go on an adventure on your own, it's a lot more difficult than having people around you. And so definitely it's really cool to see how God was able to work through that timing, and I think there was grace in that timing. Because imagine maybe what you would have fallen into if you wouldn't have recommitted this summer before college.
That's a really great point. I think the timing was important. It would have been difficult to kind of walk through it all without having some kind of some kind of commitment. And so freshman year was, a little bit difficult because of that, trying to just, figure out how I wanted to, live my life in a certain way.
Yeah.
That's hard to be kind of wrestling with all the time. Like,
Yeah.
especially, things like things you don't know, like, like what is the expectation as a Christian in certain situations? Like what is just being too much of a stickler or whatever? Like that's a hard line to walk. But I was able, I think probably one of the most important takeaways that I would like to talk about is just the role of mentorship throughout it all.
Man.
I was so grateful to be mentored. I had a great mentor, Chris D'Angelo, that then turned into Charlie Densmore, who was on staff with Campus Crusade at the time.
Yep.
Still is. He's actually the director. But, that was huge. Just having an opportunity for having someone older in my life who's lived these experiences, for me to just be honest and bounce ideas around in terms of, from as much as like, how am I living? Like, examine this with me. Like, how should I be living? Sports Center update. That was huge. Two, like, bigger topics like theology. Like, what is the difference in the denominations within the church? Like, do any of those, matter? All of those questions started coming to the forefront once I kind of was re-expanding my mind there. And so just having mentorship, I really attribute. I really just am very thankful for at that time.
And was that all through college? Or?
Yeah, probably starting my spring of freshman year.
Okay.
I started going to a Bible study there, met a mentor who was a fourth-year college student at the time, Chris. Then he ended up leaving and kind of passed me off to Charlie.
Yeah.
And that was really formative for me.
Yeah,
just as an anchor point. I think we're called to live in community, and having someone that you can be open with is huge. I would highly recommend it. I still look for that. That's a lesson that I've taken from that.
You with all your med school buddies right now?
Yeah, we've got some great stuff going on there. But even not to jump too far ahead, in medical school now in Houston, I still have opportunities for mentorship. There's another organization that I've kind of just jumped into. It's called CMDA, the Christian Medical and Dental Association.
Yep.
The guy that organizes that in town has been a good resource for me in terms of mentorship. I also, there's a good Bible study that I got involved with that actually meets at a doctor's house, who, is just this really solid Christian guy. And him and his wife, they, participate in Bible study, but also lead it every once in a while. And so it's, a bunch of medical students who, are just trying to, figure it out and come from all different faith backgrounds, all the different denominations. And we're just, anyway, so that's been great. And so I still feel like I've been provided mentorship in all these different ways. And that's been really wonderful. And this, of course, I have to say, is outside of the mentorship I've been receiving from my parents. Like, it's been, ever since that senior summer, I felt like I can be really open and honest with them, which is great.
Yeah.
And that's been very, very helpful. But on-site mentorship is important too. People you're meeting with regularly. That's been very, very helpful. Yeah,
man, that's good that you were able to seek that out throughout college.
I didn't seek it out, to be honest, the first time. I got invited to a Bible study, went, thought, okay, maybe I'd want to meet regularly with somebody to talk about these things. So, that was kind of brought to me. I'm not trying to say I just, had wisdom beyond my years or something like that.
Yeah. That
was given to me.
Yeah. Still receiving it though is wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, cause for me, I didn't start receiving mentorship until middle of my junior year it was my senior year of college. Cause I was involved with Young Life up in Denton all through college, with FCA a little bit up in Denton.
Nice.
But yeah, I was in a small group for Young Life my junior year, and then senior year with my lacrosse schedule, it wasn't able to work out as far as the small group schedule.
Right.
But that was whenever I felt the Lord really pressing me, hey, you need community, but I think specifically for the season, you need mentorship. You need someone who's been through the season you're about to go through, kind of like the last year of college, last go around, and being able to give you wisdom on how to like move forward and kind of like this transitionary time. And so for me, like the blessings that God's given me from mentorship, even throughout that small amount of time, was amazing. And me and my mentor Jaron, like we still meet here 4 or 5 years later, whatever it is. But even more so, like being able to have that mentorship from almost like the start of college all the way through is amazing. That you were able to have that.
You can't do it alone.
Yeah, man. And so, kind of getting into your college experience.
Sure.
Because I mean, I've shared a little bit like about my college experience on here,
right.
and kind of talked about like some of the good things, some of the tough things, and like being a student athlete, kind of like what that brings. And for you, it was even on another level, because like playing lacrosse at UNT is pretty much nothing compared to.
No, it's a good deal.
Nah, but compared to playing it at Duke is awesome. And so, kind of share a little bit about what I don't know, either stories or experiences or lessons that you learned kind of as like a student athlete throughout college, and just kind of where your faith either kind of helped with that, or things that you struggled in your faith because of your platform and different things like that.
I mean, probably the hardest thing about being a student athlete was just the almost obsession with performance. Every day you put it out there, and you're trying your very hardest, and you kind of make mistakes. And one of the things that I do is I'm really hard on myself, which I'm not saying is good.
Same here,
right.
man.
So so that was probably very hard. 4 years of just being under the lights, competing, which is also great. Like it drove me to work really hard, and kind of like molded me. Being under that pressure, being able to step up to the pressure. I think all those were good, but it was also hard. And so I think from like the Christian perspective, that is hard, because if you're like so focused on that goal, like you can miss out on a lot of important things, right? Yeah. Especially when you tie your like when you kind of bridge that next gap and tie your self-worth with your performance. Like seriously, did coach see you do a good thing? Did they see you do a bad thing? Did they even basically whatever it was, like if it takes that next step of like, well, I got I don't that was like everything I was working for. I got 12 hours of sleep. I ate right. I like showed up early. I did all these things for that moment, and you didn't get that gratification or satisfaction. Then that made it hard. But that kind of just comes with the territory. I'm not trying to totally say that that's not without its own benefits. And I think that is good to strive for something hard in spite of gratification or from others and whatnot. Yeah. But I think it can be more consuming than it needs to be. So that was difficult.
Because I mean, like whenever you're living for that acceptance, I mean, you lose sight of like your value, like in God's eyes. And like whenever, like especially just like the part that you were talking about with the struggling with perfectionism and like being too hard on yourself, like that's something that I've struggled with for a long time. And like it gets underneath you, like and there's this tension between like wanting to be the best that you can, but then as well like knowing or having some sort of like awareness of like you're never going to reach a perfect level. And so just like where is this line between like wanting to like strive to get better and like the contentment that we should kind of have?
I think that's exactly right. And I think that the most important part was just that you said was just not searching for external sources of validation, right? Like I think it's totally appropriate to work as hard as you can towards something, right? As long as you can be, satisfied or not tie your self-worth towards it. Yeah. So one of the things, I got to, there was a lot of great resources at Duke. One of them was a guy named Greg Dale, who was like a sports psychologist. He gave some good resources, but, he met with all the athletes, and we would get to talk to him about, just, what we could do to take our mental game to the next level and stuff. And so that was awesome. But he was big on that, just in terms of, set hard goals for yourself, but you measure them. Like I would try to I typed a thing in my locker that was, my benchmarks. It was like, did you lead? Did you invest in those around you? Did you like give it everything you had? Not to be cheesy, but but those were things that I was really trying to work, and I worked just as hard, but I tried to take my at least my lacrosse performance satisfaction out of, did I meet my own goals? And that helped a lot. That helped take away from the distraction of, it helped take away from the distraction of, that external performance validation. And I think it can be damaging to the Christian walk, because, we shouldn't really be looking for probably even our own goals for satisfaction, but, the way God views us, truthfully. So that was hard. That was the hard part of it. Totally worth it though. I really enjoyed every second of it. I feel like I grew tremendously, made a ton of really great relationships with people from all kinds of different backgrounds that I still get to be friends with today, including the coaches, staff. I really look up to all of those guys and the way that they led and invested in me and kind of molded me as well. So I'm very thankful for that experience, but you're absolutely right to ask, like, it's not without its difficulties.
Yeah, man, seriously. And I think that almost comes, now that I think about it, with like kind of any valuable or like worthy adventure almost. Like even like with starting like especially like me in college with lacrosse, like there were like there's times where you like have to sacrifice certain things that you want.
Oh yeah, sacrifice is a great word too. Yeah, you did learn. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Like I was just gonna say, like for you to be able to like serve your teammates the best that you can, and be in your best shape, like there's certain things you have to sacrifice. Like you have to sacrifice those Oreos every night, or things like that.
That's a great point. Coach D, who I really look up to, is a Christian, and he had us read this book called The Servant. I think it's by James Hunter or something. Okay. Would recommend it, but that's all about servant leadership, which is fundamentals based off the Christian faith. Jesus washing other people's feet. You earn the right to lead somebody by them wanting to follow you. You can't just demand it of somebody, and that's kind of how Jesus led, and that's how great leaders should, or most effective leaders do lead. So he had us read that book, and I
would recommend it.
It struck a tone with me. Still on my bookshelf. Yeah, I highly recommend it. But it gets to that point you're bringing up about like service and sacrifice for that goal.
Yeah, and it's just like with like these big things, like it's something that like has to happen. Like even like it's numerous. Like you look at it numerous times in the Bible. I mean, Abraham, for example, like God didn't have him sacrifice his son, but he made sure that he was willing to, so that he could
his priorities.
Yeah, so that he can give like the inheritance that God had laid for him. I like, this is kind of a unique one, but I think even with Moses having to sacrifice the identity that he had with like his stuttering and speech problems, kind of like laying that down and really letting like the Lord work in him in terms of like a new identity and potential like ridicule or death. Because like imagine if like God didn't come through with the plagues like he had promised Moses, like Pharaoh would have probably chopped his head off.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't know. And so there's numerous times in the Bible where like a step of faith and obedience in the Lord that can often just be summarized in a word: sacrifice. It is something that God requires of us to reach like these really worthy goals or adventures that, like He's called us to. And it's almost like, I think it's almost like a necessity through life. Because even if you think about it, like I know for me, like with our group with Perspectives, like we've had to sacrifice, weekends where we would, if it wasn't for this, if we wouldn't be pursuing this calling, like that we could like go out with friends, go enjoy sports games or concerts or whatever. Even like when like we don't have it right now, but like whenever our families come around, like whenever we both have like wives in the future, we're gonna need to sacrifice certain levels of like autonomy and freedom to be able to like serve her the best and
Right.
have that relationship be the best. And marriage is a worthy venture like in that. And so yeah, man, like it's great that like the Lord was able to teach you, and it's awesome because like I love sports because they're I really think they're like a microcosm of life. Like at almost every lesson you learn in sports you can apply somewhere else. And I've seen it numerous times, like in the workplace with my full-time job. I'm sure you've seen it in med school, and with friends. But it's amazing that you were able to like learn those lessons and things like that at a young age, so that you can have that wisdom kind of going forward and be able to draw on those experiences. And so it's amazing. And so kind of going forward then, because for me, I struggled a little bit with like the transition from playing lacrosse
To not playing lacrosse?
in terms of like identity and different things. Yeah, man, like was that a struggle with you in terms of the transition? And if it was, what were some of the things that God allowed?
Yeah, how did you work in that?
Exactly.
I mean, honestly, the hardest part for me was just feeling unfinished. We lost, unfortunately, my senior year, we did lose in the first round of the playoffs, which, I mean, unless you win it all, like every team's senior season is going to be the most memorable and be tough. But, the fact that we didn't get another game, kind of blindsided me a little bit. And just feeling like I was working towards, all these goals that kind of just that ended, It was hard to not think about ways that like, I really did feel good about the way I did all that, about the way I led or, just gave it my all in whatever role I had. I felt really good about all of it. But that was probably really hard, just having it end, with no opportunity for continued, time with that team. That kind of, I was wishing I had a fifth year or something. So that was hard. And then obviously coming to medical school, it was also hard to kind of like turn off the competitiveness. I've been trained for 4 years to compete and to love that. And now it's like a situation where you're in medical school and like, okay, if you want to compete, you're competing against all your friends. So, probably not appropriate. So I just decided not to worry about any of that or think about that because I didn't think it'd be productive. But then, there's no great sports outlets. My roommate played soccer. He's a great guy. And so I've gone out on the soccer field and it's humbling, it doesn't necessarily translate that much. So that skill's kind of gone, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now I'm in grad school, starting the PhD. And I might have more time. I might try to go walk onto a pro team or something if I can.
Yeah, man.
Texas Rattlers.
Yeah, like Texas Rattlers or with the PLL.
Yeah, I'm staying in shape. We'll see what I can do.
Yeah, man. And I think it's great because I think one of the things that you have to do whenever you know a experience in your life is gonna eventually come to an end is like give it all you got. Because I think that's the main way that people will like look at this like season of life with regret is if it's something where you don't give it all you got. Yeah. And so from there, like you being able to be confident that you gave it all you got is good. And like me, I know that was something for me as well. Times I went for sure overboard. But yeah, for me, I think that was the main thing that was able to help me through that, was knowing, hey, I gave everything I got. And like I love this quote by like Peyton Manning. He's my favorite football player, but and during his retirement speech, like this was one of the quotes that he said is, when somebody thoroughly exhausts an experience, they can't help but revere it. Like revere the experience, revere the sport in this case. And I think that's something for both of us that God was able to give us, was like we gave the game everything we could. Yeah. And so we can look back on it not with regrets, but being like, that was a great season of life. Yeah. I loved playing this sport. Yeah, I wish I could play more, but it's time for something else. Yep. Now.
I agree.
And so.
Yeah, I was self-aware of that during my senior spring, and there was a song called "Could Have Been Me" by the Struts that I kind of latched onto and was like playing over and over in my head. It's worth a listen, but it basically is like. It's basically exactly that. Don't let it at the end of the day you be saying that could have been me. Yeah. So yeah, I don't have any regrets there in terms of effort or like what I gave to that team. But obviously wish it could have gone a little bit longer.
Yeah. Same here, man.
But it was great. I mean, one of the things that I want to highlight is just during that time in college, that freshman year, someone invited me to Bible study, went, got a mentor, was mentored, and then senior year, it kind of gelled. There was a couple of other Christian student athletes, and we were able to start a small athletes Bible study, which was awesome. Yeah. And so I really attribute that to that mentorship, and so I just want to highlight that for anyone listening, just that. Yeah. That kind of role and progression, and just the way God like explicitly worked through, sure I had some status as an athlete at Duke, and that kind of gave me a platform to like share, not like like put it in people's faces, but be like, hey, we're doing this if anyone wants to come. Yeah. I think that was a good experience.
Yeah, and it's cool, and like being able to see the seeds that you sowed. Yeah. Like people being able to reap those later. Like one of those moments for me was.
Remind me, I've got a moment.
Cool. Because throughout my time, like one of the things I felt God telling me to do was to pray before every game, which
that's cool.
Which even for that, like I don't even remember doing that in high school. But for some reason in college, I just felt like God telling me to do that. And my freshman year, it was really like just like there was a couple teammates that joined every now and then, but it was just something that was me. And then if I remember right, it was sophomore year. Teammate Pete Jelinski saw me like praying first game, and before the second game, he was like, "Hey man, like, can I join you in prayer?" And like a group of us just started praying, and so all throughout the rest of like the years, there would be a group of, 4 to 6 of us praying, which on like a, 30-person team is a pretty good number.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so one of the cool things was the first regular season game after I graduated, I went there to support the team. And I saw like a few of the guys like continuing to pray, and I was just like,
"It's awesome."
Dang, because like during that time, I was struggling of just like pressures, like did I make an impact on the team? Perception, all of that, self-worth, self-value, and God just really shone through in that moment. But what's the experience you want to share?
Well, it just was happened recently on this trip I just went on, but I think that what you said can't be highlighted enough is that one of the things I think people get spiritually dry on is the fact that they don't see the way God's using them in their lives, right? Yeah. Like you just feel like, okay, well, I've been trying to love on people and I don't know where any of this is going. So like getting to see the way God's used that is awesome. I think that's really cool that was made clear to you. And just want to be encouraging that that is making an impact, that it really is, like,
Yeah.
whether it's just like an impression someone has of like that they think about later or whatnot, that you can really, touch lives that way. So jumping to, since you asked that question, I had a really cool experience recently. So this, I guess I can just go a little bit into the service stuff.
Yeah, man. Let's go into that.
So just to catch up to speed quickly, back when I was in Orlando, part of the church that I went to First United Methodist Church in Winter Park. They had a very active, missions outreach deal, both locally and abroad, to impoverished areas. It was mainly just service trips. They went to Costa Rica for several years for work trips. 2007, they realized there was a lack of clean water in this region for a whole host of reasons. A couple of people got together, started drilling wells for these communities, turned into an NGO. I really think it's a really well-run one. They modeled it off of the Millennium Water Alliance, which is a pretty established, sustainable, clean water initiative. And so I think they've got a pretty good model. But last week I got to go back down to Agua Viva Serves, which is in the northern area of Costa Rica, and had a really cool experience just on impact. So, the first time I went on a service trip was 2008 when I was a young cat. That was with my family at the time. And we've kept returning to this same small town, Los Chiles, on the northern border with Nicaragua for the last 12 years. We haven't gone every year, not even every other year, but we've gone several years, and especially in recent times. Anyway, so I went on this trip this last week with my dad. We were trying to help on a big clean water project they have in the region where they're trying to make a water system for 160 homes.
Yep.
So that's like 800 people. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my dad and I were walking in the little city, and this kind of gives me chills thinking about it, but they were walking in the city. We were walking in the city, and one of the other guys on the trip goes more frequently than my dad and I do, and has a lot of friends in the city. So he was walking with this guy, Andre, and they walked up to us, and we were just about to greet him, and this guy, Andre, looks at my dad and says I remember you,
Yeah.
And my dad is by no means a celebrity. He's pretty low profile. I love the dude, and I think I really look up to him, but he's not
It's not he's got a wicked mustache or anything.
Yeah, no, he's never
that.
calling attention to himself.
Yeah.
And so this dude, Andre, walked up and he said, I remember you. I remember when you, looking at my dad, he said, I remember when you, played with me and all the other kids on the the school grounds of the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
They did this big water balloon fight and, ran around and played red light, green light. So then I took off my hat and he was like, oh, I remember you too. You were there, right? I was like, yeah. And, and so we got to talking. He spoke great English. He learned English as a means to have better job opportunities.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, he remembered that week-long trip. He was able to name my sister's name. He asked about my mom. That was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he remembered us, it really just kind of blew me away, right? There's no reason that should have made that big of an impact, but it did.
Yeah, those little things.
Yeah, and so that's a weird, not a weird. It's just a unique situation. Sure, we're in a foreign country, but that I'm always gonna remember that in terms of, making impacts where you don't know you are.
Yeah, and that can apply to anyone, at any time, and it especially can be an encouragement for those people going on mission trips, because, for those who either, I think it applies almost for every mission trip. There can be people that struggle with this, but whenever you're going somewhere and you're only there for a week and you're either not able to see the project you're working on finished or the people use it, you're almost just kind of oh, well, I don't see the full vision of it. I was just a part of it. And you're almost tempted to be did I really put in any work?
Yeah.
Whenever we went down to Costa Rica, not this year, but the year before, we were stuccoing walls on this like huge multi-purpose facility that the children's home that we work with down there has been building. And we did like maybe like 1/4 of one of the walls, and whenever you get done at the end of the week, you're just like, wow, we did freaking nothing.
Right.
But then we come back this year, and like I just went there 3-4 weeks ago, whatever it was, and you get there and it's just like, wow, like, so everything is stuccoed, the roof is on now, and they should be done within like the next like year. And it's just like, wow, like what God was able to do through me did have an impact, and it's encouragement both like for people on mission trips and people just in everyday life. Helping someone out, like holding a door open for someone at a grocery store could make an impact. Being like buying someone's Starbucks that's right behind you, like could make an impact. And so being aware of God's ability to work through like our small little decisions and interactions is huge. And so like that's awesome. Like thank you for sharing like that story.
Well, it was fresh. It came to my mind as soon as you said that. I've been kind of ruminating on it. It really I think my dad and I were both impacted, just that here was this kid who's now an adult who remembered that investment of time with him and all of his friends, just playing soccer and games,
So. And that was a trip this year, right?
Yeah. So that was I re-met Andre like a week ago.
Yeah.
But it was 2007 when we met him the first time.
Yeah. Dang, man. And so kind of talking about that trip, because I know that we eventually wanted to kind of talk about it and kind of get your experience.
Sure.
What I don't know, you shared a little bit kind of about what y'all are doing down there with the organization.
Trying to drill clean water.
And things like that.
Drill for clean water.
Yeah, what maybe, because I think this would be a cool angle to kind of go from. Like, since you've been down there for a little bit.
Yeah.
What were some of the things on this trip that may have been different than other trips?
Right.
And I don't know, was there anything specific that kind of like God spoke to you about, taught you about like during this trip?
So this one was pretty cool. I think that's a good question, Chase.
Yeah.
So this was a pretty big group. It was like 32 or 34 people. There's this guy that led a trip, Kent Akins, who he's just like a very charismatic guy. Draws a lot of people to him.
Yeah.
Very laid back. Very like he's a role model for me and everyone around him. So he was leading the trip and leading this trip this summer. And I think what made it different was that there was a high school guy from Orlando, Florida, who invited basically his whole football team, or kind of their whole friend group. And so they all went. So it was a really cool experience, because this was probably not one of the first times, but this was a clear time where, now I am going back on a trip. I remember going on trips where there were people older than me that I looked up to.
Yep.
And, wanted to ask about the next stage of life. And now this trip was different, because now I found myself in that role. And I'd been in that role for a couple of trips. Like I'm 25 now, but this was like a big group where I was in that role. And so that was really cool, just to kind of like just hang with these, these young adults and just kind of bounce ideas off about like career choices and what, how to make the next best step, or, we did like small group little devos every night, and getting to, share a little bit of my story was awesome. So that was a unique part of the trip, just getting to kind of like be in that role and work with kind of the next generation, which is awesome. I think what was another cool thing from this trip? This trip was particularly exciting for me just because of the size of the project. Every time I've gone in the past to work with Agua Viva, they do a lot of wells for like small little neighborhood clusters, like groups of 8 homes who desperately need water and have, bad, recurrent diarrheal illness or, hepatitis infections from drinking surface water. So there's a real need there. but it's a little more small scale,
Mm-hmm.
important but small scale. This is the first project I got to go down and work on that was, one of these big water systems. We're building this like 12-meter tank, which is like 36 feet. And,
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then I think the last thing was, knowing I was going to be in more of a leadership role this trip,
Mm-hmm.
I knew I kind of had to pray a little bit more about it. So like in the weeks leading up to the trip, like our Bible study was praying about it, trying to think about like, trying to be active in thinking about what would be like, appropriately timed things to share, but also just praying that, God would put things on my heart,
Yeah, man.
or like, lead me into the leadership role there. And so that was probably what made this trip most special.
Yeah, man. And that's good that y'all were intentional just about that,
Yeah.
because that was something that I would say, like, not even that I would say that was true for like this year's trip down to Costa Rica was something that I like wasn't intentional about. It was something where I don't know, I didn't prepare for the trip adequately, and I got myself way too busy, and I was supposed to be in, a semi-leadership role, and I wasn't obedient kind of like to what God wanted me to do, and so I wasn't really able to kind of fully manifest in that role that kind of God wanted me. But I'll say to his credit and his grace, like the trip was still amazing. The actual leader of the trip just bossed up. Like she was amazing, and everyone on the trip had a great experience. But yeah, so just credit to you for being intentional about that. Because it is difficult.
It just made the trip special. But one thing I wanted to say was just, one of the cool things about going on a service trip, either locally in your local community or abroad or wherever you find an opportunity to do it, is just that, that's usually a pretty clear place where God is working. Like sometimes if you're in such a routine habit in your own day-to-day living, that you can miss ways God is working, or you just have basically tuned him out because you're just in a flow.
Seriously.
So like getting out of your environment into a place where there's like good people, Christians working. It's just like it's just refreshing to jump back into that and know that would be there. So like I know what you're saying. Like you go on a trip and sometimes you're not like in the right, place in your heart, or you haven't, you might be in a little bit of a spiritual dry spell or something like that.
Yeah.
And that is hard, but I've still found that even when I go in those situations, like you just still see the way God's working. Like it's just present,
Yeah, man. And I could say that's definitely even true for this trip. Like even though it how can I say it? It wasn't how maybe I thought God wanted like the trip to go, and I could have led like the group better. There's still some like crazy things that God did that like I didn't see coming up. And so
that's one of the most powerful things that I think builds towards a testimony or builds towards your faith is like, one is just experience. Like sometimes you got to put yourself in a situation where sometimes like when you're put in situations that only God could have got you out of, like that's one of the clearest ways that you can see faith. Like there was no reason that I should have been, had an opportunity to be a part of the Duke lacrosse team based off of where I was, playing in Texas. Like we were like no offense to our team, but we were like a Division II school, struggling to make the playoffs. We did make it, but like that was, I feel like God opened a door. Another experience that I had where I feel like God really showed up was we had a big house fire. My family did back in 2013. Kind of, as you'd expect, lost most possessions. Thankfully no one was hurt. That was a huge praise. But just the way that God, provided for my family immediately after the fire with, friends or people that I hadn't even kept in touch with, that came and supported, and just the ways that I think that we had to rely on God in the days and years to come. Like I really have that as an experience I fall back on.
Yeah, man.
Towards my testimony. And then there's several other times when I've been on service trips times where I just have had conversations with people that I really felt like led into, like some we were talking about earlier, like you had, where it's like, wow, that is like almost spooky the way that conversation transpired, or I felt like I was, just things like that. Those are those experiences that I think really are strongholds to fall back on in terms of faith. The other thing, the second one is like obviously, the Word of God. Like there's a testimony in a book that God exists, and I think people, honestly, it's just a little bit ignorant to not take a look at it. I haven't read it cover to cover. I'm trying to, I'm also trying to, compare it to other religious texts. Like I think that's important too. But I think that is that's important, is to go to the source and see what God has to say. And then the third one is just like the whole story is convincing. Like particularly the part about the disciples, the apostles, after Jesus died. So like the idea that, okay, there's a guy named Jesus, came down, lived a perfect life, was the Son of God, and died on a cross, right? And then not only died on a cross, but was resurrected and beat death. And as a result of this, this action, he was the ultimate sacrifice to atone for our sins indefinitely, and is a pathway for us to know God. Like that's the story, right? But I think what makes that story probably most powerful is the disciples, right? So like after this incident, right? After this, crazy, unbelievable miracle, right? What happens, right? Basically, Jesus comes back, talks to them for a little bit, and then like ascends and is gone, and doesn't give them much more direction other than go and make disciples of the nations, teach them, basically just spread this knowledge, right? And they did. They went to all over the kind of early world at that time, very far away from each other. Yeah. And to the end of their lives, they professed what they had experienced, right? But what I think is most powerful is that they died for this profession too. Like if it was all a lie, the fact that these like 11, 12 people died for it is almost unbelievable. Like I'm gonna mess this up. Charles Dodson, is that his name? Can you look that up?
Let me look that up.
I want to get this name right. But the Watergate scandal. Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
We might have to cut this part.
Nah, we're letting it go.
Okay. Is that right?
Don't know.
Just type in Charles something Watergate.
Okay.
I can do it too. Let me just do it.
Charles Colson?
Charles Colson. Yeah. Okay. So this is a great story. So basically, Charles Colson was an advisor for Nixon, right? And he was in on the scandal. He knew about it, okay? So when it all started coming out, him and basically two other guys like sat down in a room, and they agreed that no matter what legal pressures they would face, they were not going to tell the truth to basically to rat out Nixon, right? They were basically saying that we're going to lay it out there and we're going to protect this lie, right? But what happened was basically within like 3 days after this meeting, with all the legal pressures and, the lawyers coming down on them, all three of them basically ended up confessing and going to jail because they couldn't back this lie, even though they were very committed to keeping it, right? So then taking that to the apostles, like, if you think about it, like, if, there's a story about what Jesus did, but if it didn't happen, why would they have died for it? Like these 12 people, they were scattered all over the world at very different times, some not even in communication with each other. Yeah. But to the end, they were professing that this happened, and they died terrible, terrible deaths for it. Deaths that they could have gotten out of if they just said, no, this isn't what really happened. Yep. And so that I think is so powerful. And that's what made Charles Colson actually become a Christian in prison. He realized, he was like, look, here we were three of the most powerful men in America, and we couldn't keep alive for 3 days. Like, how could these apostles have kept it for, up 60 years, or not that long, but years, and be alone in different parts of the world and die for them? So those are three things that I think are important to kind of
keep in mind.
Keep in mind, and to kind of fall back on when you're thinking about faith.
Yeah, because I think so often we almost forget the ability of God to like work through our testimonies, especially whenever they're kind of, I guess for like American standards, like quote unquote like cliche ones, and so it's really good to remind people that like your testimonies have value. Anything that like God has given you has value, and so that's really really good, man. I guess is there any other things from the service like trip or anything else or any other topics you want to talk about?
I was just thankful to get to spend time with my dad, meet some new cats, get to invest in the relationships in Costa Rica. I mean,
Costa Rica is amazing.
Can't say enough about this NGO in terms of their sustainability. You know, like pretty much most of the decision making, the leadership, you know, is all local. You know, they've hired, you know, local workers who now have taken that next step of role of having leadership roles in the NGO, and they make the decisions. They get to sift through where the wells should go, prioritize. I really do maintenance, year-round maintenance on the wells if they're needed to make sure they last. I think it's good.
Yeah, man. And that speaks to like our desire for like sustainability to make these communities that we're going to serve like stable and being able to like serve them. And so man. I think that's good, man. Is there any other topics or last words or things like that you wanna share? You think that was pretty good, man?
Man, that was great. I liked having the opportunity to get to share that. You know, I obviously value my friendship with you, Chase. We've been friends for a while now. You know, I think the lasting point I'd want to make is just that, you know, to try to live a Christian life, which by no means anyone is doing perfectly. It's pretty simple. You know, it's, you know, finding mentorship, you know, whether that's in peers or in people older than you, to kind of bounce ideas off of and as anchor points for you. And then just falling back on those things or investigating those things if you've never investigated them before. You know, what does this text that millions of people believe in say, right? Yeah. Like, go read it. You know, what experiences in my life have I seen God, right? And then everyone's faced with the decision of what they're gonna believe about Jesus, right? Like, was it all a lie? Like, I can't believe that based on the bona fide history that these people died for what I don't think was a lie. I think they really did see that resurrection, and that's why I do believe in Jesus. So, so I think that was great. Thanks for bringing me on. You can reach out to me at Rowland.Pettit@gmail.com if you have questions, or through Chase. That's it.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and like thank you for letting me crash down here in Houston. For the weekend.
Glad to have you back.
But yeah, man. So guys, that'll be it. Just for the podcast today. Thank you all so much just for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts, definitely feel free to just leave it down in like the comment section below. Feel free to reach out to us on our website, perspectivesworldwide.org. All that will be linked below. Rowland, just want to thank you again, man. Really appreciate the time, and thank y'all so much. Just encourage y'all to go serve people, go change your perspective, and much love.